deactivated.
Hello and welcome to the channel. I hope you're all staying safe during this turbulent time, and I hope that this video provides some sort of value and entertainment to you. Before we get started, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that you can stay up to date with all the uploads. Now, at the outset, I just want to say, if you know me personally or from the various Facebook groups and online forums, then you will know that I'm an ardent supporter of Evolve Skateboards. However, in this video, you can expect me to be brutally honest about my experiences with this board. I'm not an Evolve ambassador, nor do I have any formal connections with Evolve, and I take a great deal of pride in sharing unbiased and valuable insights to the awesome eSkate community. With that said, I hope you appreciate that this has to be a long video, because I've got plenty to talk about, having ridden this board for 18 months. This will be a comprehensive review of all aspects of owning an Evolve GTR, not just the riding itself. But as usual, I've split this video into a few sections to make it easier for you to navigate. I've left timestamps down in the description below and also on the screen, so feel free to skip to any particular section. So from the outset, Evolve claimed that their GTR series boards can reach a top speed of 26 miles per hour and a range of 32 miles, and that's using the stock 97mm street setup. For the AT setup, on the other hand, they advertise a top speed of 22 miles per hour and a total range of 19 miles. When it comes to range, the actual range that a rider is likely to achieve is of course dependent on a number of factors like weight, riding style, riding mode, and for instance the PSI of the tyres. But in general terms, it's fair to say that the specs which Evolve advertise are bang on achievable for the vast majority of riders. We have a few GTRs in our local riding group, and for the most part everyone achieves or even exceeds what Evolve advertise. The figures aren't overestimated as they were on my boosted boards or on the dreaded Slick Revolution board. Let's break down each spec and my own experience over the last 2 years. Top speed. As far as I'm concerned, I found this to be accurate. I've been able to achieve the top speed of 26 miles per hour using the stock 97mm street setup, but I should say that usually at this speed I'm flickering between 25 and 26 miles per hour on the remote. I attribute that to my weight at 122 kilos. Using the 7-inch AT setup, I've had no issues whatsoever reaching the claimed 22 miles per hour. It's worth noting that these speeds can be achieved in the upper half of the battery, but as you start to chew through the battery of the board, you can expect to lose 1 to 2 miles per hour on the top end. As we'll go on to discuss, one thing which makes Evolve boards really popular for riders is their versatility. You can easily switch out your 97mm street wheels to 107mm street wheels and up your top speed. For instance, I've been to 31 miles per hour on a slight decline. I've heard people complain that the top speed on the Evolve boards is whack, but 26 miles per hour is no joke. Even on a board double the cost, you don't really want to be riding any faster than 30 miles per hour because you'll wind up really hurting yourself seriously if you take a fall. I recently put a post up on the Evolve owners group about injuries people have sustained whilst riding, and some of what I saw really terrified me. Don't get me wrong, speed is exhilarating and it's great, but remember that these things are not toys. Try to always wear pads and a helmet, but especially when you're pushing past your comfort zone. My conclusion on speed is that it is adequate, but having ridden this board for so long, I find myself longing for just a little bit more on the top end. If Evolve could release a board that achieved 30 miles per hour on AT wheels, I think that they'd be onto a real winner. But of course I understand that there are legal and safety considerations at play too. Torque and sag. In terms of the torque, first I'll discuss general riding and then I'll discuss my specific case. So similarly to top speed, GTR riders will find that their board offers the most amount of torque in the top end of the battery. As you chew through the battery, there is of course a decline in the amount of torque that the board offers, but it's not so much that it makes the ride unenjoyable. By 50% on the battery, you've lost, I would say, 10% of the total torque on the board. And when you're in the final 5% of the battery, you'll probably be limited to around 80 to 85% of the total torque. This may not sound too good, but bear in mind that all boards suffer from this, and most boards in fact don't fare as well as the Evolve in the final 30% of the battery. With my GTR, even at my weight, I've been able to tackle some super steep inclines at 2% battery, so it's not really something that I would worry about. The only time I long for more torque is when I'm racing, for instance at the Evolve go-kart track events. Range. In terms of the range, I would say that this is where my weight plays the biggest factor. I have friends with GTRs half my weight who ride on and on and on and seemingly never have to worry about range anxiety. In my case, as you may have seen from my range test video, I can expect anywhere between 17 and 22 miles using the stock street setup and riding in pro mode aggressively. That's of course dependent on the weather. I have reached 33 miles on 97mm wheels, but that's using the eco mode, which is no fun. For ATs, again using the pro mode, I can expect anywhere between 12 and 15 miles from full to empty. For me, the street wheels range is more than sufficient, but I found myself neglecting the AT setup because 12 miles is just nowhere near enough. Group rides with ATs for me aren't really an option because I'll just end up inconveniencing everyone with a charge stop. I should say that you have the choice of purchasing additional batteries and swapping them out mid-ride. I do actually own a second full-size GTR battery, but to be honest, as time's gone on, I've found myself using it less and less, purely because of the inconvenience of carrying another full-size battery in my backpack. But I do use it now and then if I want a full day of fun. As I alluded to earlier, a huge advantage of buying into the GTR series is the versatility of the product. For starters, you are essentially purchasing two boards if you opt for the 2-in-1 street and AT kit. Every time I switch the setups, I feel like I've just jumped on a new board, and that's a fantastic thing to keep your ride exciting and enjoyable. You also of course have the option of choosing between the carbon series if you want a stiffer ride, or the bamboo series if you want a more flexible deck. Because Evolve offer both Kegel and ABEC core gears, you can choose between almost any diameter wheel to use on your board. And as for ATs, you have the option of 6, 7 or 8-inch tires in urban or off-road treads. Also, the board is clearly designed with the consumer in mind. Everything is super modular, from the plug-and-play battery and motors to the bearings with inbuilt spacers and speed rings. This means that riders won't find it taxing to diagnose potential issues with their board, and they'll feel confident in swapping out certain parts without having to send the board back to Evolve, losing valuable skating time. It also means that the boards are easy to strip down for maintenance and cleaning, or switching between additional batteries and travel batteries. Which, talking of maintenance, the only parts that I've really had to replace often are the bearings. Other than that, I've been using the same belts, gears and hubs from literally thousands of miles ago, which is a huge plus. This leads us nicely onto reliability. The board just works. I've literally put it through hell, commuting on it to university, riding through the rain, riding light trails. And when you consider that I'm 122 kilos, it's really some feat that the board hasn't completely given up on me by now, especially after more than 5,000 kilometers. I haven't really had any major issues with the board, apart from once when I destroyed my ESC and motor because I used a screw that was too long and I went straight into the motor cable. That was user error on my part. Evolve are often criticized, and that's maybe just because they are the giant of the eSkate world. In a similar way, you find many people criticizing Apple products and people who buy into the brand. In my experience at least, you find that the GTR boards are far more reliable than the vast majority of boards out there. With a bit of TLC now and again, this board will last you a long time. One of the many reasons that I upgraded from the GTX to the GTR series was the enhanced water resistance. As I mentioned, I use my board to commute, and so it's really important to me to be able to rely on my board to take me where I need to go regardless of weather conditions that are outside of my control. In my experience, the Carbon GTR is phenomenally water resistant. I mean, I've literally ridden the thing through fountains. Of course, I know that I do this at my own risk and that Evolve does not cover water damage in their warranty. All I would say is that if you need to ride in the wet on your carbon GTR, know that the water resistance is reliant on the integrity of the weather seal inside its enclosure. Ensure that it's correctly in place and then screw down your enclosure tightly to form a watertight bond. In a world of seemingly endless customer service horror stories from various brands, it fills me with joy that I can enjoy total peace of mind when it comes to Evolve because of their phenomenal customer support. While some owners of other boards have had to wait months for an email response, in my experience with Evolve support, I've never had to wait more than 1 working day. I recall when I had my GTX board and I once had a motor issue. The turnaround between Evolve collecting the board from my home, fixing it and returning it to me was about 3 business days, which was just absolutely bonkers. Matt Global heads the service team at Evolve UK, and really I can't sing his praises highly enough. He's always gone above and beyond to get me back on the road whenever I've had any issues, even if it means having a 1-hour phone conversation with me. I know that Matt works incredibly hard within his job, and really he is an asset to Evolve and a credit to the company. The reason I upgraded to the GTR was in large part because I knew I could rely on his awesome customer support. And I'm glad to say that for the duration of owning this board, he really hasn't let me down. Even for instance, supplying bearings to me when I really needed them. It's the little things. I think the reason why he's so passionate about his job is because he's also a really passionate e-boarder. So really his hobby and passion is also his occupation, the stuff of dreams. Evolve UK supports do not turn off. They were working weekends long before they announced officially that they'll be working weekends. Those considering getting an Evolve board or upgrading to a newer Evolve, consider that customer service is half of the story. It's so reassuring to know that the brand will always be behind you when you inevitably need it. I don't mean to take any digs at any brands, but my first board was from Slick Revolution, and suffice to say it wasn't a pleasant experience at all. Even with Boosted, it would take them months to respond to my emails sometimes, and they still owe me an extended range battery that they promised, but of course they went bust. I only mention that so that you can understand why I appreciate good customer support so much. Billy Gaish, who's joined Evolve UK quite recently, is also doing an amazing job of being an open channel of communication, providing valuable insights and information to UK riders like myself. Billy is a long-standing member of the eSkate community, and I have the privilege of working with him in Carve Electric UK. Evolve recruiting him is really a testament to their passion for the community. And talking of community, at least in the UK, Evolve are renowned for being heavily engrossed into the eSkate community. Their ambassadors and ex-employees like Andy Smith were some of the first to attend community events like Critical Mass in London and host eSkate group rides. Still, until today, Evolve is the e-board brand at the forefront of the community in the UK. They've hosted and invested in events for all riders of all different types of boards, from the UK Open to Cyclo Park to even the Evolve go-kart track events. As far as I know, some of these community events are replicated in Australia too, and I've also seen activity on the other side of the pond in the US. Evolve UK recently moved to the eSkate riding hotspot of Olympic Park, and that's just for me testaments to their passion for the riding community. Their store even has 24-hour outdoor charging for any PEV users, and I know that they also have this in other stores abroad too. If we go on to talk about the Evolve riding community, we find that it's probably the community with the most amount of riders around the world. Just the Facebook group, for instance, has 13,000 riders. What this means is that you can diagnose potential issues super quick, because in all likelihood, someone before you has experienced the same problem. It's harder to do this with manufactured boards that are less popular, or with DIY boards that are self-built and more nuanced. Yes, you can have common parts, but the integration of one part to another will probably be different from one DIY board to the other. Through Evolve, I've been lucky to be able to network and make friends with some amazing people all over the world, and I'm very grateful for that. Can it be sold cheaper? Yes, of course, but to suggest that it should be is a complete oversight of how businesses operate. Though it might seem attractive at first to sell cheap boards of this caliber, it's a very short-sighted and unsustainable approach. You need a good markup to pay service staff, uphold excellent customer service and have service centres, replace parts, constantly diagnose new issues, and of course develop for the future. Even Jeffrey Friesen, who was an engineer at Inertion and who was the brains behind the Foxbox Unity controller, says this. I'm sure that most GTR owners are more than happy to pay what they do for a GTR, in the knowledge that 1. The boards are hella reliable and good quality, and 2. They're in the hands of the best customer supports from any eSkate manufacturer if things do go wrong. It really is unrivaled, and when you're so engrossed into your hobby that you're willing to pay as much as you do for a GTR anyway, you really want to be back on your board as soon as possible, anytime it malfunctions or you damage it. Also, when you compare what the GTR costs to your average e-bike for instance, you're really getting a lot more bang for your buck. Finally, if price was such an issue, you wouldn't find that Evolve is probably the largest eSkate manufacturer in the world. And on your typical group ride anywhere in the world, you're likely to find at least 1 or 2 Evolve boards. So I said at the start that this review would be unbiased, so let me go ahead and tell you exactly what I think the GTR series could improve on. I've owned and ridden this board for long enough to know exactly where it falls short and where it can be bettered. I hope Evolve, when watching this video, reflect on some of this constructive criticism, as indeed they did with the GT series, and take it on board. No pun intended. After all, I think it was listening to their customers' concerns on the GT series that made the GTR as great as it is. So whilst I've thoroughly enjoyed owning and riding my GTR over the past many months, there are some areas that really unfortunately disappoint me and I wish that Evolve could improve on. Let's dive into them one by one now. Bigger motors. I can't really address criticisms of the GTR series without tackling the elephant in the room, that being overheating motors. Now, this seems to be an issue avoided by most light to medium weight riders, particularly if they're not racing, but heavier riders unfortunately don't escape so easily. If you weigh more than 100 kilos and you go on a ride where you're constantly gunning it on GTR mode in every direction, irregardless of hills and inclines, then I'm sorry to say you definitely are going to experience this phase of overheating motors. Your speed reading on your remote will turn red and you'll be kicked from GTR mode down to Pro mode, and the best course of action in this scenario is to wait and let your board cool to not cause any damage. I ride in Pro mode most of the time anyway to preserve battery, so it doesn't really affect me, but still this is a huge area that Evolve need to address. Bigger motors can also perhaps allow the board to achieve a greater top speed, which is something that I'm really after. Bigger battery. If Evolve were to act on the community's desire for bigger motors, they would also need to upgrade the battery so that these bigger motors can have more juice to be fed on. As I said earlier, I'm really longing for a bigger battery so that I can get back on my AT setup and start exploring light trails and off-road again. If I could get 20 to 25 miles riding aggressively on ATs, then I'll be a really happy bunny. Connection issues. So at this point, given the amount of attention that this point gets, I really feel that this review would be incomplete if I didn't cover it. First things first, my personal experience. In 5,000 miles of riding my GTX board, I never once experienced any dropouts or connection issues. Move on to the GTR, the same was the case for about the first 1,500 miles. Since then though, on a few occasions, I've experienced what I thought were connection issues. I really tried hard to diagnose what was happening, and I discovered that it wasn't in fact a connection issue, but rather I charged my board to full capacity and gone out for a ride, immediately riding downhill whilst applying the brakes, and in the process provided too much regen and current into the battery. Because of what I can only imagine is a safety feature to protect the battery from overcharging, my remote disconnects and doesn't allow me to accelerate or brake further. This problem is fair enough, and I know that it exists with other boards too. The solution is to just charge my board to 98% if I know that the ride will start on a decline. But what about the cases of people's brakes brakes locking up on them or having sudden disconnects. I've been on the Evolve forums/groups for years, and I've seen back and forth discussion on this particular issue. In my judgment, these lockups are the result of one of three things. First reason, it's important to note that the R2 remote for the GT and the GTR series is unlike practically any other e-board remote out there, and that is principally because it relies on triggers and magnets within the remote, and these triggers and magnets actually determine the braking and acceleration of the board. Where the remote is dropped, even if gently, these settings are likely to alter and must be reset to restore the correct trigger settings before going on another ride. What's likely happened with some people whose brakes have locked up on them is that they've sustained some sort of impact on the remote and haven't reset the trigger values as per the Evolve manual and Evolve instructions. So as unfortunate as it is that their board locked up on them, it's really unfortunately a case of user error here. Secondly, we need to understand that the brakes on the Evolve boards are proportional. What this means is that they'll be much weaker and softer at slow speeds, but when you're bombing it down a hill at 30 miles per hour, even a couple of millimeters of pressure on the brake trigger, if the rider is unprepared for it, will throw them straight off and give them that lockup sensation. To the second reason, the third reason for perceived lockups is tapping the brake trigger without realizing. As I said, the R2 remote is a very unique remote, and as far as I'm aware, there's no other manufactured eSkateboard that ships with a remote with separate brake and acceleration triggers. Many people are perhaps not used to this and not used to having to be so careful about not tapping the brake trigger accidentally. I've seen quite a few people online say that they've tapped their brake trigger on the side of their jeans or on their bag and they've instantly been thrown off their boards. Importantly, at the time they thought it was a lockup. Am I directing the blame away from Evolve here? Absolutely not. I'm just trying to call a spade a spade. Can Evolve improve on the remote front? Of course they can. Let's talk about that now. More durable remotes. Given how delicate the GTR remotes are, especially because of the magnets, it would be really nice to see Evolve introduce an extended level of protection to the outer casing of the remote without compromising the Bluetooth connection. There have been many reports online of riders dropping their remotes and completely wrecking them, either wrecking the casing or wrecking the screen or both. Now granted, they weren't made to be dropped, and wearing the lanyard will massively reduce your likelihood of dropping the remote. I for one have never had any issues with my R2 remote. I'm still using the same one that shipped with the board. But people will be people, and if you drop the remote of your average e-board out there, it's likely going to take a scuff and survive. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the case with Evolve remotes though. Some added protection on future iterations of the remote, or even an external case like is available online, would be a great addition from Evolve. Additionally, I think it would be really nice if Evolve also offered a scroll wheel type remote, which I think that many eSkaters are probably more accustomed to and will feel safer using, but critically keeping the screen and the stats similar to the VX2 remote. Charge port cover. So for context, ever since the release of the GTR series, the rubber cap for the charge port cover has always been a kind of point of contention. The thing just wouldn't stay in, leaving the charge port susceptible to dust, moisture and dirt exposure. Evolve sought to rectify this by releasing a version with a deeper grommet, which I got my hands on. But in my experience, whilst it was definitely an improvement, it would still pop straight open whenever your board would undergo some vibrations. That's why I'm actually using an aftermarket 3D printed port cover. Thanks Nath. And it's never let me down so far. Recently though, Evolve finally came out with a charge port cover that seems to solve the issue once and for all. An issue, mind, that was a defect with all the GTRs sold prior. So it was actually really disappointing to see that Evolve are charging £1 or $1 for this new cover. Now you may say to me, what's £1 when you've spent $1,700 on a board? But really it's the principle that matters. In my view at least, the consumer should not have to pay for the design fault of Evolve, and they should be offered these charge port covers for free on request. Charging time. When it comes to the charging time, you're looking at about 4 hours for a full charge from empty to flat on a standard size battery. Now, this might be more than acceptable for your average rider, but for me, I came from the GTX series where I was accustomed to using the fast charger, and that fast charger brought my charging time down to 2 hours. Of course, the GTR offers a bigger battery and more range, so it's expected that the charging time will be longer. But it's a little frustrating waiting for a slow charge at a cafe on a group ride, for instance, when you know that Evolve could probably release a charger with a higher ampage to cut the charge time right down. That's definitely an accessory that I would pick up. Evolve app. I was really excited when Evolve announced their Explore by Evolve app in the GTR launch, but I'm sad to say that it was very much an anti-climax. I did once compete in the mileage leaderboard and I reached top 5 or top 6 in the world, but I was constantly having to deal with the app crashing and not recording my rides, so eventually I just completely gave up on it. As for the custom mode that purportedly offers a greater punch than the GTR mode, I've never been able to connect my board to the app to configure the custom mode, so that's a little disappointing. I don't really need any of these features to enjoy my ride, so it's not a big negative for me, but it's a negative nonetheless. If anything, for the Evolve app, I just really want to see the charging status of my board and the battery percentage, and also the odometer and total mileage that I've done on the board, just like Boosted Boards had on their app. I think that works really well. This would be a complete godsend when charging at group rides, for instance. Notwithstanding all of the criticisms that I've mentioned, would I buy the GTR again in hindsight? Absolutely I would. Is it worth it for you? I really can't say. That's a subjective decision that you need to make, considering your own situation, your own riding style, and what you're looking for in a board. Is it the be-all and end-all of eSkate? Absolutely not. After riding this board for so many miles, I think I've reached the threshold and the climax of what it can offer me.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places.
To be honest, I've gotten used to the torque, the speed, the range and the carving, and I desperately want some more.
Please, sir, I want some more.
I think one way that I could really get back the excitement from my ride would be learning a new skill, like sliding for instance. Thanks Average eSkate Reviews for all the videos. I think that would add a new dimension and a new element of risk to my ride, and that would inevitably make me a much better rider. When you buy into an Evolve board, you also buy into a huge Evolve family and awesome customer support. In my view, the GTR series caters for 95% of the eSkate market, offering street and AT configurations, quality and reliability, all at a very competitive price point. The vast majority of eSkate riders aren't comfortable going down the DIY route and making their own board. Neither are they comfortable paying £3,000 to £4,000 to £5,000 for a pre-built monster. Having said that, I think personally I'm at a stage in this hobby where I'm looking to source a new premium eSkate board, one which can offer me more speed and range. Perhaps that would be in a Flux Motion or a Cali board. Heck, if Evolve release a new board which meets my needs, I may not even need to move on from the brand. And having the awesome customer support from Matt is always a huge incentive to stay with Evolve, but time will only tell what happens. So with that said guys, let's wrap up this video here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the GTR series, especially if you're an owner. What do you like about the GTR series and what do you think that Evolve can improve for next time? Let me know down in the comment section below. This video took a mammoth amount of effort to put together, so if you appreciate this content, please let me know by liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Nowadays nothing really is only one of me and nobody's like me. Phone ringing and I tell him it's I got wifey on bling and she freeze photo please no photos G's no please no photos. Hit the door and the dumb and just whole team here might need some. Still young but I move like a